Hello guys, support Sanders the Great by subscribing and getting us to 1,000 subscribers. We truly appreciate the support. After 22 brutal months, sidelined by shoulder surgery and double Achilles ruptures, Deshaun Watson steps onto the field in Chicago as a stripped-down, less explosive version of his former self. Forced into Todd Monken's fast-paced, decisive passing scheme, his bad habit of clinging to the football won't just stall drives, it will get him crushed and benched. Standing on the brink of Cleveland's final contract guarantee year, this preseason opener represents the literal last stand for his career as an NFL starter. Stick around for the ultimate verdict, because if Watson falters under live hits tonight, his era is officially over and the Shedeur Sanders era in Cleveland begins immediately. To truly understand the psychological weight hanging over every single snap in Soldier Field tonight, you have to rewind the clock 22 agonizing months. Think back to late 2024, when the initial disaster struck. Watson collapsed on the turf, reaching instinctively for the back of his right leg, a moment that sent shockwaves through the Cleveland front office and confirmed every critic's worst fears. That initial Achilles tear was supposed to be the bottom of the abyss, a grueling 9-month road of immobilization, heavy scar tissue breakdown, and meticulous retraining of basic motor functions. But fate dealt an even crueler hand during the rehab process when a catastrophic secondary rupture forced him back onto the operating table. Combining a double Achilles tear with the residual damage from his earlier shoulder reconstruction created a surgical nightmare rarely seen in modern professional athletics. For nearly 2 full years, while the rest of the league evolved, traded picks, and crowned new champions, Watson was trapped in the isolation of medical facilities, learning how to put weight back on his heel, re-establishing neural pathways, and fighting through the intense mental tax of watching his own franchise drift away from him. When a quarterback misses nearly 2 full seasons, the physical degradation is only half the battle. The psychological erosion is what destroys careers. Every rep in training camp, every drop back in non-contact drills was conducted under the shadow of doubt. Could his body hold up under the violent, unpredictable nature of a real NFL pass rush? Could he trust the right leg that had twice betrayed him when planting to drive a deep out route down the sideline? The calendar turned endlessly as days melted into weeks and months, turning a once-generational dual-threat playmaker into a complete enigma. For 22 months, the Cleveland Browns operated in a state of expensive limbo, anchored to a record-breaking $230 million fully guaranteed contract while their quarterback remained invisible on Sundays. The media noise grew deafening, fans grew impatient, and the front office was forced to start planning for a future that no longer revolved around him. Now, the countdown clock finally hits 0 under the fading summer light in Chicago. This isn't just a routine preseason game where starters take a quick series before grabbing a clipboard on the sideline. This is a high-stakes athletic trial with 0 margin for error. As Watson buckles his chin strap and trots out onto the grass, the atmosphere feels less like an exhibition match and more like a final examination for a gladiator whose survival hangs by a thread. The stadium lights gleam off the orange helmet, but inside that helmet is a passer who hasn't felt a unwhistled hit from an unblocked defensive end since late 2024. Every step he takes toward the huddle carries the invisible freight of 2 surgical repairs, hundreds of hours of painful physical therapy, and the existential threat of total replacement. The entire league is watching with a microscope, eager to see whether the man taking this snap bears any resemblance to the superstar of old, or if the relentless march of time, trauma, and physical breakdown has permanently closed the chapter on Deshaun Watson as a franchise quarterback. When you strip away the high-stakes narrative and analyze the pure biomechanics of Deshaun Watson's return, the medical reality is brutal and uncompromising. To understand why Watson is no longer the player who once terrorized defenses in Houston, you have to look directly at the structural mechanics of a quarterback's lower body. The Achilles tendon acts as the primary spring for explosive movement, storing and releasing elastic kinetic energy every time an athlete plants, cuts, or drives off the ground. Enduring two separate Achilles ruptures on the same leg, paired with extensive surgical intervention, fundamentally alters that spring mechanism. The rebuilt tendon is structurally thicker, far stiffer, and noticeably less pliable than native tissue, resulting in a permanent loss of terminal ankle dorsiflexion and explosive recoil. For a quarterback whose elite trait was once dynamic lateral agility and off-script playmaking, losing that elastic bounce means his signature escape velocity has been permanently compromised. The biomechanical breakdown becomes even more glaring when you examine Watson's throwing mechanics from the ground up. Power in a professional passer doesn't come from the shoulder or arm strength alone. It is generated through a chain reaction that starts at the back foot, planting into the turf. That kinetic chain relies on a forceful push-off from the rear leg to rotate the hips violently and transfer force through the core into the release. With a twice-repaired Achilles on his driving foot, Watson can no longer load that back leg with the same violence or stability. The brain, hardwired for self-preservation after years of trauma, micro-hesitates before allowing full force to be applied to a damaged tendon. This subtle mechanical compensation causes his kinetic chain to leak power, leading to erratic ball placement, reduced velocity on deep sideline throws, and a noticeable decay in footwork rhythm when the pocket collapses around him. Beyond the throwing motion itself, Watson's pocket elasticity, his innate ability to evade edge rushers, reset his base in tight spaces and slide away from danger, has taken a massive hit. In his prime, Watson relied on split-second deceleration and explosive lateral cuts to make unblocked defenders miss in the open field. Now, his movement is strictly linear and visibly heavy-footed. He can no longer blow past an defensive end turning the corner, nor can he rely on sudden bursts of speed to extend dead plays into 50-yard gains. During press conferences, Watson himself has openly conceded this physical transformation, acknowledging that he is no longer the electrifying open-field threat he was early in his career. He is a quarterback forced to re-engineer his entire playstyle on the fly, stripped of his athletic safety net, and forced to rely entirely on pocket discipline, a trait that was never his primary strength to begin with. The tactical friction between Deshaun Watson's play style and Todd Monken's offensive philosophy is the defining X's and O's plotline of Cleveland's upcoming season. Monken's system isn't built on improvisation, hero ball, or extended double clutching in the pocket. It is an unforgiving machine governed by strict tempo, aggressive horizontal spacing, and ruthless pre-snap processing. Monken demands that his quarterback play as a prompt distributor, trusting the architecture of the design, working through progressions in rhythm, and getting the ball out of his hands in under 2.5 seconds. In Monken's playbook, the timing is absolute. If a vertical route is set to break at 12 yards, the ball must be coming off the quarterback's back foot before the receiver completes his break. This requires a sharp, decisive reader who operates with surgical predictability from within the structure, willingly trading the allure of the low-percentage highlight play for the high-efficiency drive extender. For Watson, adapting to this scheme requires an absolute overhaul of his worst foundational habits. Throughout his career, Watson's defining strength and his most fatal flaw was his deep-seated desire to hold onto the football in search of the home run shot. Historically, Watson has ranked near the top of the league in time-to-throw metrics, consistently lingering past 3 seconds in the pocket while hunting for broken coverage downfield. In his peak athletic years, that hesitation was masked by elite mobility, as he could evade pressure, break tackles, and turn chaotic scrambles into 50-yard chunk plays. But in Monken's scheme, and with Watson's compromised physical movement, holding onto the ball is an absolute death sentence. Monken's pass-blocking schemes are engineered for quick strike delivery. They are not designed to protect a quarterback who double clutches, drifts away from his launch point, and invites edge rushers to collapse the pocket around him. If Watson insists on playing off-script under Monken, the consequences will be immediate and catastrophic. Retaining his bad habit of holding the football will lead to a devastating spike in sacks, third and long situations, and brutal hits on a body that has already undergone two major Achilles procedures. Modern NFL defenses feast on quarterbacks who hold the ball without the elite agility to escape, clogging scramble lanes and forcing hurried off-balance throws into tight zone windows. In Monken's world, a sack is a systemic failure, a sin born from a quarterback ignoring his check down or missing his initial rhythm read. Monken has never hesitated to yank a quarterback who refuses to process the field in time, and his fiery side has already flared up during camp over mental errors and pre-snap miscommunications. The scheme does not care about past accolades, high-dollar contracts, or reputation. It demands cold, efficient compliance with the clock inside the caller's head. To survive in this offense, Watson must undergo a complete conceptual evolution. He has to learn to love the boring plays, the 5-yard hitch, the quick flat route to the tailback, the immediate hot read into an incoming blitz. He must willingly trade his instinct for wild, unstructured playmaking for absolute discipline, trusting that taking what the defense gives him will keep the offensive engine humming. The margin for error is non-existent because Monken's system rewards timing above all else, and any hesitation from the passer immediately compromises the entire unit. If Watson can rewire his instincts, embrace quick-trigger decision-making, and protect his body by operating purely within Monken's design, he might just extend his shelf life as an NFL quarterback. But if his instinct to hold the ball and play hero takes over, the sacks will pile up, the offense will stall, and Monken will not hesitate to pull the plug, benching the high-priced veteran in favor of a younger player willing to run the system exactly as drawn. Behind the tactical adjustments and physical rehab lies a brutal financial reality. The clock on the most controversial contract in NFL history has reached its final unyielding chapter. When Cleveland signed Deshaun Watson to a historic, fully guaranteed 5-year, $230 million deal in 2022, the organization operated on the assumption that elite, franchise-altering quarterback play would easily justify kicking the accounting bill down the road. Year after year, the front office repeatedly restructured his deal, converting base salary into signing bonuses and pushing massive financial obligations into future void years to stay cap compliant. But by repeatedly kicking that can down the road, Cleveland built a staggering financial wall that is now coming due. As the 2026 season arrives, Watson's contract represents a total financial albatross, carrying a terrifying dead cap burden that effectively locks the franchise into a do-or-die timeline. The upcoming offseason represents the absolute end of the line for Cleveland's patience because the salary cap mechanics finally make a divorce possible, albeit excruciatingly painful. For years, cutting Watson was a non-starter. The single-year cap hit would have utterly crippled the roster, forcing the front office to field an entire squad of league minimum contracts. However, following the latest restructures and the strategic accumulation of future void years stretching into 2029, the Browns have positioned themselves to utilize a post-June 1st designation in March of 2027. This maneuver allows the organization to formally sever ties with Watson while splitting and jaw-dropping $86.2 million in remaining dead money across 2 off-seasons, accounting for roughly $34.7 million in 2027 and another $51.5 million in 2028. While eating over $86 million in dead money for a player no longer in the building is a historically bitter pill to swallow, the front office views it as a necessary tax to finally close the darkest, most expensive chapter in franchise history. This stark accounting reality turns every throw in this preseason run into a literal trial for Watson's future as a starter anywhere in the National Football League. For Watson, This isn't just about preserving his spot on the Cleveland depth chart. It is a live audition for the rest of the league. If he plays with conviction, operates efficiently within Todd Monken's fast-paced offense, and proves that his rebuilt lower body can endure live pressure, he might convince another team to take a flyer on him as a bridge starter or high-end backup once Cleveland inevitably releases him. But if he struggles, looks hesitant, or succumbs to further physical decay, no front office in football will offer him a starting nod ever again. At 30 years old, coming off 2 Achilles ruptures and possessing a track record of severe inefficiency over the last several years, Watson is staring down the very real prospect of absolute athletic obsolescence. For the Cleveland Browns, the franchise outlook has already begun shifting toward a post-Watson era. Ownership has publicly acknowledged the immense gravity of the mistake, and the front office is actively preparing for life after the deal. The lingering presence of high-profile young talent on the roster, combined with incoming insurance cap credits from Watson's missed time, gives the organization a sliver of financial maneuvering room as they pivot toward a fresh start. The era of bending the entire cap structure around one individual is officially over. Every pass attempt in these exhibition drives is a high-stakes calculation of risk versus reward. Cleveland is no longer evaluating Watson as their long-term savior. They are managing an exit strategy, evaluating whether he can provide short-term stability or if the future must begin immediately. The safety net is gone, the guarantees are nearly exhausted, and Watson is running out of time to prove he belongs under center in the NFL. As the late afternoon sun dips over the edge of Soldier Field, the atmosphere inside the stadium feels far more like a survival test than an exhibition game. All the months of closed-door rehab, surgical checkups, and controlled training camp reps shrink down to the single most critical half of football in Deshaun Watson's life. Todd Monken has laid out the operational parameters with absolute clarity. Watson gets the entire first half against Chicago, complete with a scripted 2-minute drill before halftime, giving the coaching staff an unvarnished look at how their high-priced starter operates under authentic pressure. Success for Watson today cannot be measured by staggering stat lines or explosive 50-yard bombs. In Monken's offense, true success looks like precise, unemotional operational execution. It looks like taking the snap, hitting his back foot on a 3-step drop, and ripping the ball out to his hot receiver before the pass rush can even collapse the pocket. It looks like slide-stepping away from edge pressure without grimacing, trusting his rebuilt right leg on a crucial 3rd and 4 slant, and willingly throwing the ball into the dirt when a play breaks down, rather than holding onto it and taking an unnecessary hit. If Watson can move through his progressions with quick trigger confidence, navigate a tight pocket with functional footwork, and put together a crisp scoring drive during that high-pressure 2-minute drill, he will temporarily calm the storm in Cleveland and justify Monken's trust heading into the regular season. However, the margin for error inside that Chicago stadium is vanishingly small because modern NFL defenses do not grant grace periods for quarter-billion-dollar quarterbacks working their way back from double Achilles repairs. The moment Watson steps onto the turf, Chicago's defensive front will treat him with zero sympathy, bringing exotic blitz packages specifically designed to test his lateral escape velocity and force his eyes down toward the pass rush. If Watson looks hesitant, if his footwork drags, or if his natural instinct to hold onto the football leads to violent sacks and stalled drives, the entire narrative around the Cleveland quarterback room will pivot in a matter of seconds. Every double clutch in the pocket and every off-target throw down the sideline will be amplified by millions of fans and analysts waiting to see if his physical regression is permanent. The coaching staff on the sideline won't have the luxury of endless patience either. Monken's system demands absolute rhythm, and if the starter proves incapable of delivering that rhythm under live fire, the franchise will have no choice but to accelerate its timeline and pivot toward the future. Standing directly on the other side of that halftime whistle is the dynamic that has captured the attention of the entire football world. Rookie sensation Shedeur Sanders. As Monken explicitly outlined, Sanders is set to take over the offense for the second half in Chicago before flipping roles and starting the following week against Buffalo. Sanders represents everything Watson currently is not: a young, supremely confident passer whose entire game is built around rapid pre-snap processing, smooth footwork, and a willingness to distribute the ball with effortless tempo. While Watson carries the heavy baggage of a $230 million contract and 22 months of medical trauma, Sanders enters the huddle with zero lingering fear and an entire fan base eager to unleash a new era of Cleveland football. The contrast between the two passers will be stark and instantaneous. If Watson stalls out in the first half and Sanders immediately steps in during the third quarter to execute Monken's system with poise and efficiency, the quarterback competition will cease to be a theoretical camp debate. It will become an overwhelming mandate for change. This preseason opener in Chicago is the ultimate fork in the road for the Cleveland Browns franchise. If Watson rises to the occasion, embraces Monken's quick strike architecture, and demonstrates that his body can withstand the physical violence of live NFL action, he can salvage his standing as a starting quarterback and buy himself time to rebuild his legacy. But if he falters under the bright lights, if his movements remain stiff and his decision-making stays locked in slow motion, the illusion of his comeback will shatter on national television. The NFL is an uncompromising league where history waits for no one, and Cleveland's front office cannot afford to throw away another season waiting for a ghost of the past to reappear. If Watson fails his test against the Chicago defense tonight, his era under center is effectively over, and the Shedder Sanders era in Cleveland begins immediately.